Well, I got to tell you, without fans, the whole entertainment business would fade away.
Well, folks, rock and roll comic book time. I've got the man in the house. That's right. Nick Weiser is here. We're going to talk comics with you. Man, if it's not a wake up for you on Comic Book Wednesdays, we're about ready to do it for you, my friend. Nick, thank you, my brother. I'm so thrilled we can get our schedules to align and get to talk comic book nerdy stuff with all these wonderful people. How are you, my brother? What's going on?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me, and shout out to Pat S for bringing us together. I know you and I briefly crossed paths in Orlando at the Orlando meetup, but of course, I was like a crowd of hundreds, so it was like a nice hello and all that. But now it's like we could finally have an open dialogue and talk some common culture within the two of us. So I'm really happy to be doing this, and shout out to our wonderful faces in the chat. Thank you guys for being here, and of course, lastly but not leastly, for Pops for having me on to do this.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I can't wait to spend some time talking nerdy stuff. And yeah, it was great to get a chance to meet so many people at the Orlando thing. It was my first time doing one of those meetups, so I didn't have my bearings straight on how to navigate everything. And then it was just mayhem and I don't mean this as an offense, with us second tier, third tier YouTubers or whatever. We were like discombobulated and excited at the same time to meet one another, but it was just like utter chaos for us because we weren't the center. So it was like, I don't know, but it was so cool to get a chance to at least shake hands and get to know you. And yeah. Before we get too far into this though, let's give everybody the elevator pitch on Nick getting into comic books. Like, why is Nick a comic book dude?
I mean, it all started when back in the time, and I know you remember this. This is the Pepperidge Farm remembers pitch. When comic books were sold everywhere, whether it was your 7-Eleven, your Walgreens, your newspaper stand. I remember I saw a Spider-Man comic at a 7-Eleven. I picked it up. I think it was just a title called Spider-Man. Not amazing, not spectacular, not Webba, but it was just Spider-Man. I remember getting a comic and thinking, oh, this is actually really cool. And then for my birthday, I was given a reprint of ASM #1, which has the Fantastic Four in it, the Chameleon in it. And I was like, holy crap, comics are great. It was cool because I got to learn about all these great characters. I got to learn who Stan Lee was, who Steve Ditko was. So I was like entertaining a whole world of characters I didn't know. And then, of course, the animated series happened. And it not only acknowledged the greater like world of Spider-Man's villains, the supporting cast, but it introduced me to Daredevil, introduced me to Doctor Strange. And of course, they introduced me to Captain America. I was like, holy crap, all these characters in this one like comic book world. And I learned, oh, these characters all have their own books too. It blew my mind. And of course, the books I caught on to the most were Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the Fantastic Four. Those are the ones. But over time, I've definitely given our books around a go and had a bless them. But those were definitely the very core books for me. Were those ones.
You know what? It's so cool to hear that of someone who's obviously significantly younger than me, who vividly remembers that Spider-Man 90 hitting the bookstores, and there was like, I got to get the platinum cover and the gold cover and the regular covers and whatever. And then to know that here we are, 30 something years later, Nick's like, oh, I love comic books, but it all started with one of those books that basically started because of McFarlane. McFarlane was so good on Amazing. He got him that solo title. Next thing you know, that got Nick into comic books. That's that thread that I love to pull at. And I think it's so cool to reflect on that origin story.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm still a fan to this day. It's like, even though there's been obviously a lot more shakier things that have happened within the industry, my love never went away. Obviously, like, I've seen a lot of things come and go, and I've definitely seen the highs and most definite low of lows. But I do feel like in a way, we're definitely on a slow uprise of sorts. And I'm not talking just within the industry, but even in some of the major publishers.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree that there are. I cover a lot more newer comics than some of the other YouTubers, and it's like there'll be a single issue here, a single issue there, but I'm always apprehensive because I never know how it will play out over 5 or 10 or 15 issues, because they write so much more for graphic novels. They tend to just change people
It's all
very
about
abruptly.
the trade. There's no contained issues, and it really hurts the accessibility thing. It's one thing when you write for the trade, like the way Mark Miller does, where he writes a story, you can jump in and jump on it, but they aren't doing that. writing these stories that are really, they say that they're new reader friendly, but they're really not. And they should have taken from the lessons of what a lot of the older guys, whether it was the Chuck Dixons or even the Denny O'Neills, write every comic like it's somebody's first comic. You could read any
Agreed.
issue from Jim Starlin's Warlock. You could read anything from Innocenti's Daredevil. You could read anything from those books. You could just jump into those issues, even if you had no prior knowledge. Even if you were somehow intimidated by like a big number like issue 300, and you're intimidated by that number, but as soon as you read that first page, it was very accessible. You knew who the cast was, who the supporting cast was, who the villain was at that moment. You understood everything, and you don't have that accessibility. It's like, yeah, it looks nice and it looks all flashy and professional when you have a nice collected bound book, but when you're actually reading it, you don't understand anything because you have to start at a certain point. If you don't do that, you're absolutely lost. And I feel like as much as I love trades, I love the formatting of it. I think it's a great format. But as far as its storytelling ability, it's definitely, as far as big two books are concerned, it's definitely lost accessibility.
Yeah, it's definitely become the pick and choose your adventure sort of thing. I get a lot of that too. Like, how do I jump in? Where do I start? I was actually just last week was Angry Canadians comic book talk with me,
Mhm.
and it was kind of pointed out there's like 80 years of history. It's like walking into a library and go, where do I start? It's like, well, nobody knows. If you have a noob who doesn't know, and now they've
Mhm.
made it so much more complicated with all these reboots and restarts, it's like, I'm not even sure how the comic book owners can keep some of that straight, especially if they didn't come into the game right when it happened. I mean, because even the branding will look very similar. Volume 7 versus Volume 8, it's completely crazy. So,
Mhm.
but based on that, you definitely more than me have even immersed yourself more into, and I see the shirt representing like Rippaverse and indie comics and crowdfunded comics and like that. Talk about what Rippaverse has done for you, what you think of issues 1 and 2, because you've already done a review on your channel with issue number 2.
Mhm.
Why do you think that particular comic series is so impactful?
I think it's very impactful and a lot of things because when I discovered Eric July, he was the very first like channel of this corner of YouTube I discovered. He was the very first rabbit hole, and he had a lot of complaints that were similar to like a lot of what people had in our sphere. But he also had a lot of different complaints, which I wasn't seeing from a lot of our guys. Like one of his complaints, which, and once again, this is not something that was seen, was the issue with like the multiverse, the taking away the stakes, the fact that nothing matters. Because like, yeah, there was the typical agenda issue and how on the nose it was, but there was definitely a lot of the whole, it feels like nothing matters. And that was something that I realized, yeah, that's true too. No one else is saying that. And I thought about that made sense because with all these restarts and reboots and all of this character dies, we could just pluck him in from this. And I'll admit too, like when I first thought of the multiverse, I thought it sounded cool. But the more you actually think about it and the more you see it's cheapened any impactfulness, whether it's a death or reveal, it definitely lessens all those impacts. So seeing Rippaverse be this book where we need to be one universe, we need to make every issue count. It's not about whether it's good or bad, but we need to know that you're only a piece of history with each story. And that the fact that these comic books matter, and the fact that also too, he's not writing something that is as conventional as a lot of people. We're in nowadays an age of so much, as he likes to say, instant gratification. Everything is just get done and move on to the next thing. I think that's something that has Netflix has definitely been the most notorious about. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it as a knock on the show's good or bad, but it's more the fact that people re-watch something just to move on to the next thing. And a lot of people who were puzzled with Ice on #1 were like, okay, there's something going on here. But a lot of people like, there's all these questions, and he's not trying to be in and out with your story. He's there to bring back the investment. That's why a lot of people, a lot of readers who bought 500 issues of Superman, they kept going because they were invested, and he wants to have that long lasting, long developing story with the readers invested. And it's nice to see someone who's willing to play a little bit of a slow burn just to keep you glued. And to me, I feel like because people gotten so used to everything happening and getting what they want right away, it's really altered our attention span. And so a lot of people are now like, okay, I see Ice on 2. And they're like, oh, okay. I see this. This reveal was worth it. And I'm not gonna
Hmm.
say it for those who have not, read it yet. But for me, there's a reveal that happened in Ice on 2. I'm like, okay, awesome. This is great. as long as the payouts are good, I'm willing to wait this game out. I remember what it was like when you'd have to see subtle things happen and you'll see a little seed blossom, and slowly over the course of 10, 20, 30 issues, it would fully blossom into something else. That was the setup and the payoff. And it's nice to see that method of writing coming back. So between that, having also original characters like Isom is obviously a black character, and you got Yaira who's coming out from the Sussex Sisters, which is a female character. And obviously, people are taking a liking to these characters, whether it's their personality or their appearance, but they're liking them just because they think, okay, there's something interesting about these characters. It definitely shatters off the narratives that people don't want a diverse looking character, whether it's a Latino character or a Muslim character. People want good characters regardless of their religion, their politics, their gender. I think Rippaverse has proven that, and it's crushing all those set narratives to pieces. It's glorious to watch happen. I think we're seeing the early findings between that. Our buddy Jason Sandberg with Jupiter, Razor Fist with Ghosts of the Badlands coming up. We have a whole Wild West coming of great comic books, and I'm hoping it goes full like Raw versus Nitro. And I think that's when competition's at its best, when everyone's killing it and everyone's just like, I gotta top that guy's book. I think we're slowly starting to get to that point again.
I got to keep you fenced in there because I want to get there. And it's so do you feel like ISA #2 leveled up for you and did a good job of expanding the world building and gave you some payoffs?
It gave me payoffs. And of course, it asked more questions. So
Okay,
there
good.
are more questions with ISOM 2. So it's like, okay, I got this payoff, but now we're going to even give you more questions. And it expands the world, makes you feel it's more lived in, which is great too. And it also feels like ISOM #1 proper for me, because ISOM #1 to me felt more like Rippaverse #1, whereas ISOM #2 is a more immediate, drawn in story, right to the point with ISOM and his supporting cast and his villains, what's going on his side of this universe. So I think because he could condense it down to him and his world of characters, I think that was perfect. Granted, they all live in the same universe, but between his cast, I think it definitely works that he can focus strictly on that and have the other characters like the Alpha Core Yaira. You had like a super brief cameo, but nothing where it took away from what's going on with Avery Stillman's life. This story is about Avery Stillman through and through. And I think he's only going to get better. So he's clearly honing in his craft and understanding what he needs to do to get better quick. And I think 5-10 years down the road, as long as he stays as motivated as he is, Eric's going to be proven to be a very formidable writer.
What do you think about my comparison of the timeline? Because we're going along, and then the image revolution happened, right? Just completely shocks the matrix, right? So you have, the people who are behind like 40 of the top 50 books or something all exit at one moment, and they start image. Love or hate how any of that's held up. Reality was it completely changed everything for years, if not decades.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We fast forward exactly 30 years later. We're seeing crowdfunding. We're seeing, and I will also, I want to say, give credit to what Image is doing. I think with what they do with publishing with Mark Millar's books, I think that Todd's relaunch of Spawn as a Spawn universe, bringing in Gunslinger,
great idea.
It's to me, those are my. I'm most looking forward to books right now is Gunslinger. It's like is those books. Like I'm not counting Millar writes like miniseries, right? He's writing 4-6 issues. But I'm talking
they
about
all
like
live in that universe. They all live in that universe.
Month to month. Can't wait for Gunslinger to land. What happens here? It's like they're sort of like, and again, they do what traditional publishing was, where they would have those books and they would have some of, and I'm gonna use my terms, artsy fartsy, Berkeley prep, liberal, lefty agenda type stuff. They did that also. They just didn't put them in the same book. So, Spider-Man wasn't purple and pink. It was Spider-Man. So now that we see Rippaverse doing this, and you see crowdfunding and things like that, you name dropped a few of them, like Jupiter and some of the other stuff, but there's so many more. We could keep going down the rabbit hole with what Nolan's done and even Chuck Dixon's done, and just there's so many of those kinds of things. Are we going to look back at this even 10 years from now and go, wow, the Matrix broke again, and we're going to see Are we going to be on Isom issue number 15 and Yara issue number 8? And we're going to be seeing Graham Nolan's Nolanverse now is like 17 pieces big. And
monsters. Yeah.
I don't see any end in sight right now, right? I just see all of this continuing to just build and expand on itself. What are your thoughts?
I see. I know. I don't know how it will be looked on, but I think we're definitely gonna be in a world that's a lot more expansive as far as storytelling goes. Obviously, I've heard the whole thing for the last few years about how there's no interest in comics, but when you look at manga, it's not exactly Western American comics, but it's still a form of comic just from the Eastern market. And it's clear that there are young people who want to read and to buy and support physical copy. People want paper, people still want pictures with dialogue to it. And that's not like a small fringe niche minority. These books are selling mega millions. Even there's also kids too who like Dogman. That's a very big book. My older daughter, she's a big Dogman fan. She's invested, so she has all his books. She has all his books. And I think with that formula too, the way Dogman writes and even the way the Rippaverse writes, there is a little bit more of a similarity to them versus the month to month of the Spawn stuff, because they kind of come from the French land of comics. If you know about anything about bande dessinée, they have that where they put out a story every year and a half. Some will be a little bit more quarterly, but they have that where they, they take 3-4 issues worth of material and put on a book and give you the best art possible. So I think there'll be a place for both formats. I think there's definitely some advantages to the monthly, and there's definitely something to the French releasing once every year and a half. I think both formats will definitely serve their purpose in time. And I think it's great that we have it this way, because we need competition, not to have one way done, because in theory, it sounds great when you have one way of things being done. But now that we've seen the reality of how things played out, we're definitely seeing what happens when there's one distributor taking care of things. We're seeing a lot of issues with that, with everyone's having issues with Diamond for a long time. So now that, as Eric July likes to say, everything being decentralized, this is good, because you need to get people competitive in order to have the market say, okay, we got to step up our game. When everyone settles, no one's at their best. I mean, just once again, look at WWE. Vince McMahon is totally settled because he doesn't have to worry about anyone. But man, remember when WCW Nitro was creeping in on him? He took them seriously, and that's what I've learned too. Even Marvel and DC in the 2000s, they were both doing great. Marvel is doing big with Spider-Man, with JMS, Daredevil with Bendis and Brew Baker. And then you had over on DC, you had Jeff Johns with the Hal Jordan Green Lantern comeback. When both companies are winning, it's great for everyone else. So I think it's going to help make the market competitive. And once again, it's going to be an area where both formats can exist, where it's monthly or annually, however you want to call it that.
Yeah, I really, and I know you used the French model as your example. I've used the example of Hellboy, because in my lifetime, Hellboy has always been one of those. They do a little story, he takes a little break. He does a little story, takes a little break. And it's like, you didn't have to worry too much. If you missed one, you could just jump right back in, pick up where you left off. And it also seems like these people that have moved over into more creative space independently, they've opened the door now, because obviously someone like EVS, some of these bigger name folks, they open the door for someone like Jason that we talked about, because we both had conversation with Jason, got to know him a little bit. He
Great
didn't
guy.
need to raise $100,000. He didn't need to have a dusted off, perfectly buttoned up portfolio to take to the right comic show at the right time to pitch the right character. He just said, I want to tell this story. Here's some samples. Here's what I'm going to do. And you don't need that many customers, that many readers and fans to make something like that manifest. Isn't that possibly kind of what you're saying, but also hopefully can be taken as an encouragement for people to do that for themselves as well?
Yes, strongly encouraging, because you know why? It shows you that it's not about having the biggest fan base, but it's about having a loyal fan base. And when people see a guy like Jason, they catch on quick. He knows how to build a great presentation. Two, he knows how to really interact with people. And he also wants people to get invested in this story, because his issue of Jupiter #1 reads like a really strong zero issue, a prelude before something big is about to erupt. And he's clearly got people who are watching what he's doing. And as long as he has an invested amount of readership, that's what matters. Because, yeah, it's nice when you have more people. Of course it is. But as long as you have a loyal base, that is going to be enough to be around to keep you going, and anything else on that's icing on the cake. So yeah, it's about the loyalty the most,
Sure.
because you want to have your customers, your fans' respect. You want to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is when I'm going to deliver the story. And guys like him, they're very transparent. Shane Davis, they're very transparent what's going on. And as long as they do that and they're in touch with their base on what's going on, people will be more flexible when things come up, because we are, especially nowadays, we're in an age where things come up more than ever. And legit things do happen. As long as there's that transparency, you will have a loyal base no matter how big nor small.
I agree. And I think that it really is such a great, fascinating time to kind of be a content creator and talk comic books about something where the market to me is changing so radically and so fast.
Yeah.
I have a ton of ideas and things I want to ask you about, but before I get too far away, because I'm going to forget, because you kind of went around some of this stuff, I have to ask you your thoughts, because you got a chance to get a hold of a copy of the new Conan book, which everyone, there's been some good buzz, there's been some fun stuff. Give everybody a little bit of a tease on why this is so much fun and what you loved about it.
What I love about it is that it sets me right at home with what I love about Conan. It's barbaric. It's very definitely not of the PC nature. And it feels like this is going to be a book that has no restraints on it. And I don't know if there was or was not with Marvel. I don't know how everything worked there, so I can't prove or disprove anything. But there's something about this book that feels like it's going to be very Conan let out of the cage. And this is a strong first issue because he's not doing an origin story and it's not undoing anything. Yet he's telling you where he's at this point in his life. So Jim Zub is writing very accessibly. So in case this is your first Conan book, and you're like, holy crap, look at all this lore. How can I do this? That's a great cover by Dan Panosian right there. You can just jump right in. Now, obviously, if you know Conan, you benefit that much more from prior knowledge. There's no loss with that. Now, it's not like the greatest Conan comic ever, but it's not needing to be. It's clear that Zub is trying to tell a big, long story. And from what I hear, that is what he aims toward, too. And this is right here, this Hyborian Age, is all this. This is the variant cover of a fold around of a map. They made this where the front and back side is a variant cover. I have this and it's glorious. I like that this world feels like it's lived in, it's established, but it welcomes you right into the fold. And on top of all of that with Conan, had a brain fart. Sorry. What was I gonna get at? Oh, Roberto De La Torre. Dude, his art is fantastic. This is one of his covers right here. He's one of those Spanish artists. It seems like there's an uprising lately of a Spanish artist, Roberto De La Torre, Olivier Coipel, Pepe Larraz. And De La Torre, he draws in a style that you recognize. It's still distinctively his, but it's like, oh, hey, I recognize that that's Conan. And the way he formats his panels, it looks like something you may have read in a previous Conan comic. So even though it's got De La Torre's pencils all over it, it's definitely formatted to be recognizable as the Conan you love. Now, there's a lot of people who think he tackles Buscema. And you know what? I can see why they say that. There's definitely a lot of that old school influence. And I think that shows you that, once again, there are killer new artists out there. You just got to go out there and find them. They're not going to be as immediate as what's put on like a Tumblr page. But so, however, Zub or Titan Comics got a hold of De La Torre, shout out, because dude's outstanding. I hope he stays on this book as long as possible with Mr. Zub.
It just looks amazing. I haven't got a copy yet. I'm hunting down. I'm trying to pick out which variant cover I want. I'm trying to decide how I want to approach this. Got to be honest, it's one of those like, don't know. It's kind of like Death Dealer. I had to kind of wait a minute before I started grabbing a couple. Like, I had to kind of wait a minute to find my lane and find the right spot and that kind of thing. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least try to address the situation with Marvel DC. I have long said that the only path to redemption I see is the companies eventually will focus on the financial disaster that has become these two books, these two companies within the company, and they'll start licensing thing out. Somebody will go, all right, well, we're not going to keep making 100 books a month. There's 50 books a month. We're going to say, all right, we're going to do these characters, but then we're going to license things out.
Mhm.
If you were in charge tomorrow, if Nick is in charge and we're broke, because we're broke,
Mhm. Mhm.
Nick, what do we do? Is licensing one of the better options that you think is at the feet of these two big publishers?
I mean, I've heard that being tossed around, not as far as what they're talking about, as far as what people think they should do. I mean, that's definitely something to entertain because with the current crop of writers that they got and the editorial as well on top of it, because this is not like where it's just a bad writer or two. This is where this is top to bottom.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Editorial has their part in it. Like everyone is doing it. And it's the whole slate needs to be as far as they go, they should not be touching these books because they're clearly not fans of these characters. A lot of these writers, they relate more to villains or they relate to themselves. So when you're tackling a book like Batman, you're supposed to become the character, not the character becomes you. And
Tom
we have
King.
seen, yeah, I know, right? Sound familiar? Yeah, Tom King, look at you.
Brother.
But yeah, not to go down that well, but I think definitely distributing out the characters is a good idea. They could either do that or they could choose to wipe the slate clean and start over with a bunch of actual writers and artists. Will they do either? I don't know because with them being under corporate umbrellas with Warner, Disney, I don't know if they have it in them to think like that. A lot of them just think, okay, this is what's trendy or this is what people want according to social media. There's too much of a disconnect with what these corporations want. This isn't like put it this way, if Mike Judge, creator of like Beavis and Butthead, King of the Hill, if he sold off all his assets, Beavis and Butthead, all that stuff, to someone else, and they started doing all these things that seemed out of character, out of story, out of alignment with how his world of movies and cartoons were, I don't feel like those studios would know how to handle them. And I think we're seeing what happens when you take these characters out of the hands of the creator. Now, obviously, some guys like Jim Zub are not creators of characters like Conan, but they come from a place of care. And also, Titan Comics is also another company that's not being taken over by a monolithic corporation. I mean, it'd be nice to see if a corporation say, all right, we got to solve this. I don't know if they're thinking like that. I really don't know. I would like for them to be. I think I've given them enough of my time to give them that hope that they would, but I don't want to stick around for that. I've been burned so much by so many of the writers, so much of the editorial, even as well. I don't know if they have it in them. Some of them are so attached to their ideological leanings that I feel like a lot of them would just rather burn it all down than to trash everyone. Now, like I said, it could happen. It could still happen. I'm just not waiting around for them to make a change. I would love it and I'd welcome it, but I'm not waiting around for them. I'm not going to do that. That's like waiting around for an abusive spouse to make a change and you expect them to be, okay, this time it's going to be different. It never is. It's the same song and dance.
I think everybody that's familiar with my content knows I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what could still be good or not. If give you a perspective, an honest take on something. But I approach almost 100% of all that digitally. I'm just not investing a bunch of hard-in heavy cash or anything like that. I didn't know why they haven't earned it. I'd rather wait, find something I think that has some legacy or some long-term reader quality to it. Kind of like the Ninja Turtles Last Ronin. I want a physical copy. Really enjoyed this. It's something I can go back to 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, that kind of stuff, right? I enjoy nice covers and displays, right? I get graded copies. So I would rather invest in, I think I heard Gray, Rakazashi's Tea House, talk about the new Spider-Man book was $9.99. I'm like, I don't know what kind of crack these people are on. $9.99.
It's not even just $9.99. Here's the worst part. It's an issue 32, and they've already had an issue 25 and 26 where they oversize them and charge them extra. Now they're doing it for another issue, and it's also for another wedding that's not even.
I for $9.99, folks, I can get you whole runs of something. I can get you a whole vintage set of something that's a reader copy, or recommend a trade paperback of something that you will just totally love and be thankful for. Those kinds of things. Like $10 is a lot. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to Marvel be the one to tell you That's not something I can support. So,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get too far off comic books here, but I want to really kind of get into the concept that you do with the comic book shop talk you do. I know Friday night you've been running with Ironcaster and many other folks running through like vintage Amazing Spider-Man. I know recently you just had Loki on.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a
Great
little
guy
bit
to
about.
have on.
Oh, look, he's a brother from another mother. Talk to me about the idea of doing comic shop and doing live like that. And like, what kind of stoke the fires that make you do it, and what's it like? What's it feel like?
Well, it all started when me and Pablo Key Tripology and Midnight's Edge Espanol. Him and I we wanted to shred on the X-Men comic called Children of the Atom 2 or 3 years ago. And we had fun, we got out of our system. But then right when I was starting to make some shifts and adjustments with my channel, I thought, man, maybe this would be a good opportunity to highlight and remember what we loved about this medium.
Mm.
And then before you know it, we had Fenrir with us, and we had Ironcaster and Klobby and Common Nerd. I can't remember the exact order. I do know Common Nerd was the most recent. But yeah, I became a why don't we do this thing where we celebrate the medium. And there'll be cycles where we talk about a portion of a Spider-Man run, or for October we'll do a night or two where we talk about monsters. And next week we're doing Star Wars Heir to the Empire. We're doing that next week. So and there's times where it just becomes open discussion on what's going on. Sometimes we'll just have what anything goes about comics. We'll show off some art. We've done episodes where it's best suits from Batman. We'll look at every single suit from Batman, and we'll do yay or nay. It's great. And we all do it over drinks too. So a lot of us let loose a little. We have fun with that show. It's meant to be an escape from everything that's been going on with this medium. And luckily there's been some stuff that we've been enjoying. And when we do enjoy it, we talk about it and highlight as well. Like every time an issue came out of The Last Ronin, we talk about it that week, issues 2 through 5, because I didn't have the show going when issue 1 came out, 2 through 5. And we didn't even care about the delays. Most people forgot nowadays those delayed because everyone's still talking about how good it is. And if you look at the graphic novel chart, it's still selling. It just shows that it's now going to become one of those stories that's definitely in the pantheon of great comic books. So we love covering it. I mean, we cover old stuff, we'll cover new stuff. We just want to cover stuff that's good, really, and also to try to educate people, because we do have a few normies who watch our channel, and we try to give them context into things that was changed, whether it was for a show or movie. Like we did the Infinity Gauntlet, all 6 issues of that, which we had a blast doing. It was nice to see like normies who had only seen those movies, Infinity War and Endgame, but oh, okay. Yeah, it was great to give people that extra insight. People do want to see where those things come from. So we have fun doing it. It's just such a fun show, and over 100 episodes in, and it's still a growing show. I remember when me and Paul started, I think we had one person listening for 10 weeks. And now it's become this 25, 30 people listening. We're like, what happened? We just started as 2 guys who were just listening to ourselves speak, and now there's people who listen. Are you serious? It's
it's so much fun. I'm so, and I couldn't agree more with the idea of people will forget those delays when it's good, right? Dark Knight Returns was delayed, and it's like, oh, we don't really care. It was magnificent. So then you have other stuff that gets delayed and it's crap, and like we'll never let you forget it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
It's like that's the best you could do. You had extra months, but no, that's great. I love to do something crazy. 'Cause I use digital. I got a couple different apps and websites and stuff I do to kind of pull together some older things and things like that. So I love to go back to stuff we've never seen. I love to go back to the golden age, find 10 centers and stuff, and we react to that live. So we're going to do that now. Let's find something ridiculous. Let's find something. Nope, that's too new. I'm talking like 1940s and 50s. Have you looked at anything like really that old in a while? Because it's
not
fun
recently, but I should, and I want to. I definitely like some of the characters I've read from there, even though I've read recent stuff and that stuff. Like I've read stuff on The Shadow, of course.
Right.
We did Dave Stevens's Rocketeer book as well, which is a very pulpy character as well. So I recognize the era a little bit. I'm definitely lacking in information, but I want to inform myself down the road. Absolutely.
They're just a lot of fun. This is called Worlds of Fear.
Okay.
Worlds of Fear. It's a 10 center from the 1950s. Sometimes they don't even come with credits. It's so much fun to look at these.
Yeah, a lot of those issues, it wasn't. And I think you once again that brings it back to what you said at the beginning with the image boom. A lot of these issues weren't as acknowledging the creators on the front of the book. That was like if you look at a lot of the old Marvel and DC comics, a lot of them, at least through the 60s and 70s, they didn't put the names. I think they started doing some of it right around when Perez and Wolfman were doing like Teen Titans. You saw a little bit of that, but it wasn't like everywhere. But now it's obviously it's been happening for the last 30, 35 years. But yes, let's carry on. I just figure we should mention that.
Look at that beautiful.
That brought it back.
Look at how beautiful the intricate details are in
Those fingers, man. Holy
it's incredible.
crud.
Yes. Oh, here we go. We do have a little. Yeah, look at that.
Oh,
Worlds of Fear, 10 center. Executive editor. This is a Will Lieberson. Okay, that's why. Lieberson. Hyman is doing the editing. Al Jeter. All right, so good. The Tales of Ted Femur was the plea of all of us against the hurried inevitability of fate and of death. That is beautiful.
That is very gorgeously drawn. It's so crazy when you can take something that's so horrific and make it look so beautiful, but this really is
1952.
Wow. I love
and again,
it.
this is one of the coolest things we talk a lot about is how they were limited because of the printing of the time with the color palettes they could use. They didn't have the diverse digital coloring that they have now. And what you ended up having was all of these pages just jump off the page at you with the color. They're just beautiful.
It's ironic how that happens. That kind of even connects it to the movies where nowadays we're in this day and age where we have all the money and all the budget in the world, yet things are nowhere as good for a lot of these books or even movies. Yet guys who work within confines seem to be even more creative. And I think that's what helps with, honestly, with a book like Conan on Titan. They're not backed by these companies. So they know I have to make this deliver. And I better make this kind. And that's the same thing too with books like in the Rippaverse or in Graham Nolan's Nolanverse. They got to make sure this is the best that they can absolutely deliver within their limited budget and reasons. So I think we definitely need more of that. And that's hopefully once again something maybe if Marvel and DC got sold off to someone who's not such a monolith, that would be in their way to say, hey, we got to make these books good. But we'll see, man. But yeah, dude, look at these pages.
Look at that. Before Walking Dead, there was World of Fear. This is a beautiful book. Holy cow. So much motion and action done so well. The intricacies on this zombie creature is just incredible. Like he has intricate chest bones and things like that. Yeah.
You know something too? When you read these comic books at the time, these weren't like one of the biggest issues. And this even happens with some of the good modern stuff. Sometimes there's stuff lacking in dialogue where you're done with it in 10 minutes, sometimes less even. This has dialogue for days. Like some of these issues take 25, 30 minutes to read. I remember like the first 20, 30 issues of the Fantastic Four. They are all like, they're not something you finish in less than 10 minutes and you're done with it. There's a lot of story being told in each and every issue. And obviously you see that here. Like look at all the balloons and the narration, the introduction. There's lots of dialogue on it. It's not like where it feels like a homework assignment. It's like, oh man, I gotta read this. But when you read these things, they word ways to get your attention and keep you like wondering what's gonna unfold next.
We've had a couple that were homeworky. I'd be honest.
I'm sure Grant Morrison has a way of making some books homeworky. Trust me,
Claremont. Even Claremont. I'm pretty critical of X-Men 91's first couple issues. It took until about issue 4 or 5 before the engine started really running on some grease because then there was a lot of word bubbles going on in those first couples with the Magneto story. Man, woof, it's a lot. I'm not saying it's not beautiful because it is incredible, but really, really wordy. This is incredible. This is the backup story and just intricately beautiful with all sorts of interesting use of shadows and design. All these characters look so different, and it's not a bunch of cookie cutter stuff.
The faces look different too. The faces look, because that's another thing too. Like you'll even see good artists, but it's hard for them to differentiate faces. They all have those faces. You know who's. instantly as well. And once again, this is guys who had to work within their limitations. You saw Jack Kirby's old desk, that old rinky dinky desk he worked on. I think there's something motivating of when you have to put yourself in a very primal setting where, like, okay, it's just me and this, and you must be motivated to deliver your best. It's almost like you got to make yourself feel inconvenienced to bring out your best. I think there's something about that. There really is, because when you have too much convenience, you fall back, you get comfy, you get less creative, and you're just like, oh, this will take care of itself.
I agree. Well, Nick, man, it's been awesome talking comic book stuff. This is the best.
This
is where we got to kick off Comic Book Wednesdays, man. We got to kick off Comic Book Wednesday. People can get out there and find a shop, find something to get into to read, get yourself something. Maybe go out and go online over to the Rippaverse.com and get yourself a copy of that. I know he's got a special going for some back issues and things like that too. So if you miss out on something, you can catch up. So, but yeah, it's been great. Great talking with Nick. Folks, make sure you check out his channel. All the links are in the description. You can connect to him. I think it's great to continue to build upon and share and, lock arms with people who have this knowledge and this passion to talk about comic book. We can be critical, but we also can share like what is great, what is really good, the legacy, some of the history. Just really enjoy all of that. And it's been a great chance to be able to do that with Nick. And thank you, my brother, for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. And once again, shout out to Pat S for linking us together. Yeah, I hope this will not be the last time you and I talk again. I enjoyed doing this, and I hope this will be the first of many more conversations to come.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Thanks, chat.
If you're in any form of entertainment, whether it's comic books or movies or television or whatever, you've got to be grateful to the fans. You've got to be grateful for their enthusiasm, and I just love the fans.
Yeah. Right?